Howdy, howdy, howdy. Hope everyone is doing well and had a good 2022. If not, well, there's always next year. I started this channel at the beginning of this year at the suggestion of a friend, and it was intended to be a pseudo body of work that could give me some sort of tether to the entertainment industry and something to identify with while I slave away with my normal career that I personally don't care too strongly about. Overall, I'm pretty happy with what it's become over the past 11 months. I started off just wanting to do a review a week, but for a variety of reasons at a variety of times, that just became untenable. However, I'd like to look back on this successful New Year's resolution and put everything in perspective. Despite less output than I had hoped for at the beginning of the year and some movies disappointing me that I was excited for, 2022 was a fantastic year for film and television and for storytelling as a whole. So, as a way to give some more recognition to the works that I feel merit another mention, I'm creating a master list for the movies I saw this year. This list should cover everything I reviewed this year, as well as a few things I've seen for the first time that maybe didn't make it into a Roulette review at some point for one reason or another. I've always wanted to do a tier list, so that's how this is all going to come together. I'll give each maybe a quick summary highlighting my overall thoughts on each movie, or show them along the way as I rank them and why they're landing where they do. So without much delay or further grandstanding, let's start out with the ones that got their own videos so you sort of have a baseline. From there, I'll move on to the ones that maybe didn't get a review. So let's go. First up, Nightmare Alley. I covered this pretty well in my review, but I really love the atmosphere and set design in this movie. The lighting, coloring, and all just meshed together so well to create a really immersive environment for this car crash of a story. The performances of a star-studded cast are great all around, and I highly recommend this one. There's a lot to love. Cream of the crop, and it finds itself in the A tier. Alright, next up, King's Man, which just missed the mark consistently in a way that really left me wanting more. That, plus the movie's script running in place and repeating itself for a ton of the runtime, makes it an underwhelming entry into a franchise that I really don't expect too much from. There's occasional cool ideas that never get to see full development, and the film suffers heavily because of it. But it's a film that you won't really get upset about when you find it on TV and you can't find the remote. Solid C tier. This year's Scream is a worthy entry into the meta horror franchise with a fun modern twist. It's never downright scary, but I found it very engaging and incredibly funny. Scream had Jenna Ortega before she was a hot topic on TikTok, so give it a watch. It feels like it captures the current generation surprisingly well, and you have a lot of fun trying to figure out this whodunit that masquerades as a slasher movie. There's a lot of cool commentary included in the film as well through its themes, so I find this to be a strong movie that lands itself safely in the A tier. Next up, Tick, Tick, Boom. I really love this movie. It reaches emotional highs and lows that not many others can, and most of the musical numbers are really, really solid. Garfield gives a great performance, and there's just so much heart in this movie. Tick, Tick, Boom really speaks to me with the themes it decides to explore, and I urge anyone my age to check it out. And even if you're not my age, I think it has something to say that's worth listening to. So it's a powerhouse that earns the first spot in the S tier. Next up, I have Murder on the Orient Express. Though the mystery proper didn't connect very much with me, mostly due to what I thought were pacing issues, I still enjoyed this adaptation of an iconic Agatha Christie whodunit. The cast and overall setting did their job in immersing me and making me inquisitive for each part of the story, and Kenneth Branagh has a clear passion for these films, and I will happily continue to see whichever ones he chooses to adapt. If this is the lower end of the spectrum for his work, then I am excited for what could be to come. It has a similar overall reception to me as its sister picture, so Orient Express is going to rest securely in the B tier. Next up is Moonfall. I fucking hate this movie. There's nothing about this movie that I want to remember. A live stream of me drinking absinthe and getting my stomach pumped while watching Moonfall would be more narratively compelling and cohesive than what this movie actually was. It has a category all its own in the worst meaning of the phrase. Moonfall is decidedly F tier. Death on the Nile. I have learned I am a slut for a good mystery. And boy, am I going to lean into that. Poirot is such a goofy, silly little guy in this one, even more than in Orient Express, and it's a joy to watch Branagh work, as I mentioned before, even when he does need to work beside a cannibal and Gal Gadot. The mystery is a fun one to watch play out as someone who hasn't read the book, and it has that lavish, exotic, and luxurious feel that you really want out of a whodunit. It's a fun watch where an atmosphere of importance emanates from the cast and crew and elevates what is an otherwise good film to something a bit more. Enjoyable above all, like its sister film Orient Express, it finds itself very safely in the B tier. Next up is Uncharted, and if you wanted a better Uncharted movie than this, just watch a full playthrough on YouTube. It includes better acting, better characters, and better pretty much everything else. The set pieces in this adaptation are fun at times, but never really live up to their inspirations. There's not much to say about this that I didn't cover in my other videos, so yeah. Sully being Marky Mark speaks for itself, again in a bad way. Disappointing, Uncharted discovers itself in the D tier. La La Land. La La Land captures the beauty and cruelty of Hollywood perfectly. It accomplishes so much in what is most probably an overdone setting with a relatively familiar story, but in spite of that, it remains captivating with memorable musical numbers and resonant messages. This movie somehow captures a nostalgia for something that was never truly there, and it's almost magical because of it. If you've not seen it, check it out as soon as you can. It just has that je ne sais quoi. With this film being literally me, it can earn an emotional, melancholy slot in the S tier. Malignant. I often struggle to truly love much out of the horror genre, but very infrequently do I actively dislike something. Even the campiest or shittiest of schlock I can slop up with some sort of enjoyment for some reason or another. However, Malignant did not really hit any notes for me. The thriller aspect of its story unfolded in what I felt was a nonsensical fashion, existing purely for the execution of the idea, rather than the sensibility or narrative resonance behind that idea. That, on top of some other clunky elements of the film, such as exposition overload and unbelievable character choices, even by horror standards, makes me struggle to see much about this film that you can't find elsewhere done better, even within Wan's other entries to his filmography. So it finds itself on the higher end of the D tier, but D tier nonetheless. The Batman. This is superhero cinema. The fact that The Batman and Love and Thunder were made using the same VFX technology says a lot about the quality of the people who worked on this film. There was a recognizable vision and tone that this movie wanted to reach, and it achieved that, firing on all cylinders. The themes of hope and overcoming darkness to become something more inspiring are really poignant to me, and a large part of why I love Batman and the superhero genre in general. It's a film worthy of the character, and if you haven't seen this, please watch it. Great stuff all around, it exceeded my sky-high expectations, and The Batman ascends into the S tier. The Oscars. I kinda wish more people this year got slapped really hard in public. We as a population could use that kind of instant feedback for some people's idiocy. C tier, I guess. The Northman. This was something I was truly hyped as hell for, but ultimately left me really underwhelmed. From a technical aspect, this movie is astounding. It's got really amazing bits of visuals, emotion, and theme. But the story just drags so much and seems to leave this feeling of under-delivery because of it. Huge barriers to entry prevent a large majority of this movie from being as accessible as it otherwise would be to the general population. It's likely enjoyable, but not exactly what it was advertised as, and certainly something that could put a lot of people off if they're not expecting a more drawn-out fable rather than a revenge epic. It's not what I hoped for, but it's certainly a solid film, and it finds itself in the B tier. Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Midness. Sam Raimi gets his moments to shine through, but the Marvel assembly line and its inability to slow down make this film suffer. Whether it be a script that could have used a fair few more drafts, or certain bits of VFX that seem to have spawned directly from the Xbox 360, the Multiverse of Madness never quite achieves what it believes it will. It's enjoyable, but never what it could or should have been. It's a common thread to have this feeling among the Marvel projects this year, and with that, Doctor Strange lands in the C tier on pretty shaky ground. Everything Everywhere All at Once. Cinema. Beauty incarnate from its story and theme to its camera work and colors. I cried at two rocks. There is a fanny pack fight scene. Bagels and dildos are central to the plot. Need I say more? A pure Oscar contender, likely winner, and one that I will be hooting and hollering for years to come. Blowing much of this year's movies out of the water, I'd be a charlatan if I didn't award Everything Everywhere All at Once the S tier. Stranger Things Season 4. Season 4 was my ideal of mass-consumed pop media. There seemed to be strong characterization, interesting new ideas, and yet it still stayed within the mold of the show and had a strong central story to carry it through. Care and attention were brought to most every aspect of Season 4, and despite its existence as a piece of pop culture rather than an isolated bit of art, it stands out and brings a quality experience. It's incredibly solid all around, and it earns a spot in the A tier. Thor: Love and Thunder. The antithesis of everything I want from my movies. Despite being written by one guy who was given way too much leeway, this felt more like a product than anything else. Joy was siphoned out of every bit of this film, and it had a script that seemed like it never existed in the first place, with just painfully unfunny jokes that are more than half a decade old. The only part I enjoyed about this film was the black and white sequence, which was maybe 10% of the runtime. I would actively change the channel should this come on my TV, and that's a pretty harsh criticism. The only thing that saves Thor from the F tier is the fact that that tier exists solely and exclusively for Moonfall and the other affront to creation, which I will get to later. Thor finds himself aggressively in the D tier, almost breaking through into F. Prey. If Thor Love and Thunder was trying too hard and came off like the "how do you do, fellow kids" bit, Prey was a 180 on that. It's entirely simple in almost every regard, and it does what it does, and it does those things exceptionally well. Plain characterization and arcs are executed, action is delivered with impact, and even technical parts of the film fire on all cylinders. It's a quick, easy, and rewarding watch that delivers everything a Predator movie could and should. Simply put, it's a straight shot into the A tier. Coco. No other movie exists that makes me cry on more occasions throughout its runtime. A single line from background characters gets a tear out of me when Miguel first passes into the land of the dead. I see this changing at no point in my future, and Coco is a beautiful piece of art. It captures and amplifies so many emotions and ideas regarding loss, family, and legacy that I cannot do anything but recommend you experience this film. It stands as a testament to what movies can mean, what the medium of animation can create, and how the simple, digestible story does not need to sacrifice anything to be what it is. Coco deserves a spot in the S tier. Crawlers. Roll the Among Us tape. This movie is so bad, I don't even want to put it on the list. I barely even want to call it a movie. I don't understand how I stumbled upon this bargain bin receptacle DVD and ended up watching it as my first Halloween season movie. I hate myself for clicking on it. Nothing will ever disappoint me to this degree that this movie did. Not even if I have a child who becomes an Elon Musk dick rider will I be this upset. I wish I got the part of my life back that I spent watching and reviewing this thing. F tier, no parole, no appeal, no second trial. You and Moonfall deserve each other. Goodbye. Mean Girls. A perfect comedy. A perfect Christmas movie for the holiday season. A perfect arc for Katie, and a perfect, timeless representation of the social anarchist hierarchy that is high school. I intend to watch this whenever, as it is already a member of the Zach Man Drunk Movie Suggestion Hall of Fame. S tier without question. Scooby-Doo 2 Monsters Unleashed. It's a talking dog, S tier, baby. Barbarian. This was one film this year that really caught me by surprise. Not in the sense that I did not expect it to be good, because online reactions and trailers definitely sold me on how high quality it was going to be. Just that I had no anticipation for it, and that it ended up being likely one of my top films of the year. In a genre I certainly enjoy but find difficult to love, Barbarian hits every mark exceptionally well. There's great tension, good scares, and a very interesting story. It tackles its theme in an incredibly digestible manner and excels at using horror as a medium to communicate a message. But even in its simplest form, it's a great film deserving of more than one watch. Barbarian is a huge surprise that came out of nowhere for me, and it finds itself very firmly in the S tier. She-Hulk. Through no faults of the cast, She-Hulk landed for me like a wet napkin. There was just nothing particularly interesting or exceptional about it, which is becoming a repetitive story for most of the Marvel products this year, especially those that started on streaming. The desire to have a sitcom flavor of the week format was interesting and at times really worked for me, but the inherent obligation to Marvel and its manufactured style and sense of progression harmed She-Hulk more than it helped it. That and failed attempts at intergenerational humor soured me on what could have been an otherwise promising story with interesting commentary that never quite hit the mark in a very meaningful way. She-Hulk finds itself in the C tier, but at least it's not Thor Love and Thunder. Hereditary. Honestly, I usually don't enjoy the A24 brand of horror that much, with films like Midsommar kind of being a bit of a misfire for me personally. Though I typically appreciate their technical and artistic merits, Hereditary finally broke that trend for me. I found it captivating not only as a more artistic and thematic piece, but as a pure horror film too. It was scary, tense, and disturbing at all the right times, and in all the right ways. I would consider it the perfect gateway drug into the genre of the more abstract and artsy horror, and if you haven't tried it yet, take it from a commoner. It's well worth a shot. It is a keystone entry into the A tier. Glass Onion. This is perhaps my most anticipated film of the year, and this is saying a lot in a year where a masterclass movie on my favorite character came out. Rian Johnson, Daniel Craig, and the rest of the cast and crew all returned to bat for another whodunit that just rips everything up to 11. Colors are more vibrant, comedy is more bombastic, and the mystery is more absurd. This is a hugely entertaining, timely, perfectly crafted story that I intend to watch again and again, and in fact, I already have. I foresee it entering the Zach Mann Hall of Fame of movies I beg to rewatch whenever I am drunk at a function. See this and appreciate the craft behind every aspect of it ASAP. Never in doubt, Glass Onion is the embodiment of the S tier. And now moving on to the movies that maybe didn't get a Roulette review this year. First up, Marry Me, which may come as a bit of a surprise to my 130 subscribers. I'm not sure what my viewer base is like, but I have to imagine they aren't really a huge fan of rom-coms. Marry Me was surprisingly better than expected, which is not to say it was good. It kind of wasn't good, but it had its moments, mostly thanks to the actors, in spite of a weak script and some really weird camera work. There was a fisheye lens that was super prevalent for some reason. Owen Wilson is Owen Wilson, so that's always good. Not the worst choice you could make among modern rom-coms, but far and away not the best. It lands definitively in the D tier. The Adam Project. Ryan Reynolds is Ryan Reynolds, and that's a bad thing. And now he has a kid to impersonate him too. So there are two Ryan Reynolds, which is even worse. In fact, it's unbearable. There was nothing definitively wrong with it, but overall this movie had nothing about it that made it worth my while. It just kind of happened. But props to Netflix for finally hiring a color grader, who apparently they fired by the time The Gray Man came out. Once again, this movie finds itself on the D tier. Fresh. Honestly, very cool movie. The leads give good performances, and there is a generally unsettling and vulnerable atmosphere that is prevalent and engaging throughout. Though never truly scary, it gets the job done with intensity and thrills. However, the entire thing is taken completely off the rails when I am constantly thinking about how our protagonist did all of this without her ass. That is a tough body part to have cannibalized unwillingly. Emphasis on unwillingly. It earns a spot in the B tier. Moon Knight. What a waste of a cool vigilante, Ethan Hawke and Oscar Isaac. The embodiment in the television realm of Marvel constantly being too concerned with setting up the next thing as opposed to focusing on making what you have right now more compelling. I'm still angry about the climax being a literal cutaway scene just to use for a season 2 teaser reveal like 15 minutes later. It lands in the C tier, but not very gracefully. Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers. I felt like this was the definition of pure fun, throwing things to the wall and seeing what sticks. It was a pretty sticky wall, might I say. You could tell there was a love for the characters used and the source material and the medium of animation as a whole. Unfortunate that it was made by Disney, but it's a fun watch nonetheless. It's no Who Framed Roger Rabbit. It's no Who Framed Roger Rabbit. It's no Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Oh my god. It's no Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but it gets the job done comedically and from a story perspective, so it's worth a watch. Also, J.K. Simmons. Chip and Dale, welcome to the B tier. Sonic the Hedgehog 2. My biggest complaint about this movie is that there was like a half-hour detour where it was just a casual wedding movie at a tropical venue, as if Adam Sandler and his friends took over for this part of the movie to take one of their famous work vacations. However, my biggest compliment is that somehow every line spoken by Jim Carrey in this movie feels like it is the first time a human being has ever uttered that sentence before. His performance almost feels historic. Not necessarily amazing or spectacular, but historic in a similar vein to natural disasters or global events. I guess this is what happens when you don't let him do Ace Ventura or The Mask for decades. All this pent-up stuff just kind of explodes. High end of the C tier, if only for Jim Carrey. X. The alligator and the kills were cool, but other than that, most of the story didn't really retain me as well as it could have. And I was pretty excited for this movie, if only for the appearance of Kid Cudi. It's a decent horror movie, but probably not one I would consider rewatching any time in the near future. It has the slow burn of A24 without much of the immense payoff that's usually there, so it has an ambivalent arrival in the C tier. The Sea Beast. Surprisingly whimsical. I really enjoyed this one, and I think it should get some more attention. The world and characters were fun and entertaining, and it gave off the same energy as How to Train Your Dragon or even Pirates of the Caribbean. Two probably overused comparisons, but ones that fit in my mind. On top of that, you can't really go wrong with some good old anti-imperialist messaging. Definitely check this one out. It's got a really cute animal in it. It has a hard landing in the A tier. This is some good shit. Nope. If Get Out was a grand slam and Us was a home run, then I'm Not really quite sure to describe Nope as. There are a ton of super interesting ideas here, and for the most part, I really enjoy how they're executed. However, it feels like there was a good bit left on the table. Peele is clearly a master of tension, and he manages to keep this up even once he has his monster reveal, which is a tall order from the horror genre, and most filmmakers are unable to do this. It's excellent filmmaking that perhaps could have reached for a bit more, but it's absolutely worth a watch for the technical skill that's put on display, as well as the strong themes throughout the movie. Higher end of the B tier, but not quite A material. Spiderhead. This movie always felt like it was going with the first idea that popped into its head. It had very interesting premises, situations, and ideas, but never truly capitalized on them in ways that felt satisfying or entirely interesting to the story. Predictable beats are carried by strong performances from a super gifted cast. Check this out if you want to see more of Smollett, Teller, or Hemsworth, but that's really all I can compliment here. I wish it was more. Spiderhead finds itself disappointingly in the D tier. Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. This movie might be my frontrunner for a superhero Oscar contender, however, not for the reason you think. It tells a poignant and effective story, one which at times feels to drag on, but at others feels like it needs more development. Wright and the returning Wakandan ensemble are as strong as ever, particularly Winston Duke and Angela Bassett. However, what stood out most to me was Ludwig Göransson's score. The guy is gifted, and some of the ideas he plays with through the music in this film are incredibly interesting to me. Using something reminiscent of an old kaiju monster movie theme to score The Army of Talokan is just one of the many fascinating choices that he makes throughout Wakanda Forever. It harkens back to these pure forces of nature that have a supreme power and are just bringing down righteous vengeance upon humans who have taken things too far. It's a very cool idea that's present in a very minute part of the film, but it just goes to show how much care and thought was put into all aspects of Wakanda Forever. The soundtrack songs are also bangers. The Ironheart subplot was the clear weak point of the film to me, though. This is a true blue blood and in the A tier, very securely. Spirited. I expected to hate this, to see Farrell and Reynolds playing their same old characters again and again, but surprisingly they switch it up just enough for me to tolerate them and enjoy the rest of the movie. It's nothing to write home about, but it's a fun twist on the Christmas Carol story, and a holiday movie I won't change the channel on if I ever see it playing again. It's a slightly lesser entry into the B tier, but B tier nonetheless. Don't Worry Darling. I can guarantee you are not anticipating where this movie is going. My thoughts are, it's a little on the nose, but I can appreciate the aesthetic and general idea of it all. Could it have been done a lot better? Yeah. Was it entertaining to watch with a lot of interesting parts? Also, yeah. Was I surprised that the entire thing turned out to be Ready Player One for incels? Absolutely yes. I suppose it can settle itself in the B tier. Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special. This was pretty charming and a cute entry into the MCU, and debatably my favorite entry it's had this year. Everything about it felt right, and it manages to capture the goofiness of the Guardians and have it mesh with the spirit of Christmas. Also, it had better color grading and visual effects at times than the rest of the MCU this year, for the most part. A whimsical slot in the A tier for the Guardians. Black Adam. What is it with the movies I watched this year and their aggressive use of fisheye lenses? People and places were literally bending in the frame. It looks bad and unprofessional in my opinion, which coincidentally works out because this movie is not very good. The Rock spends this movie attempting to convince you he can play a new kind of character by playing the exact same character he has been playing for his entire career. Black Adam gets points for anti-imperialism, but everything about this movie is so telegraphed and predictable that it was written by Alexander Graham Bell with the story lifted from Nostradamus. Just watch the fight scenes on YouTube. It's about the same level in craft and writing quality as if you actually spent time watching the full movie. I wish I got a JSA movie instead of this. Peak cable TV movie, very much the embodiment of C tier. Top Gun Maverick. From a writing perspective, there was not a ton going on in here, though you could take Maverick's arc as something representing Hollywood, practical effects, and movie stars as a whole, and how they're sort of dying out to artificiality and these more manufactured kinds of blockbusters that just don't have the same impact. Specifically, you could look at how Tom Cruise seems to be the last remnant of an era where names sold tickets, and how that sort of parallels with the arc his character goes through in this movie. As has been covered completely over the course of the year, the action and visuals of this movie are phenomenal. It's incredibly fun if you've seen the original or if you haven't, and the practical effects and Tom Cruise risking life and limb to get thrills on the screen are always something that I am completely enamored by. Strong performances, visceral action, and an excellent musical score are just some of the many reasons Maverick finds himself very strongly in the A tier and pushing S tier. Avatar: Way of the Water. Much like Maverick, Avatar boasts incredible visuals to help satiate a viewer from what is a lack of a complex or at times even fully compelling narrative. Unlike Maverick though, it clocks in at nearly 200 minutes in length. That to me is complete lunacy. There is no reason for this movie to be as long as it is. The story itself necessitates probably 2 hours tops. That said, the detail and craft put into the environments of Pandora, the action scenes, and even the models of characters themselves are about as amazing and visually stunning as you'd expect from James Cameron and his perfectionist style. Seeing it on the biggest screen possible is a must, but this is a literal Herculean effort sitting through this film. Writing is so by the numbers that you can tell exactly what is going to happen at least 20 minutes before it happens at all times. There is like nearly an hour stretch of time where you're wondering if the movie is even happening anymore because we've taken such a detour and you haven't even seen the antagonist in that entire hour. There are about 30 different plot threads for each character here. None of them are complicated enough or complex enough or even executed well enough to really warrant their inclusion on their own, but all of them are needed together to bloat this movie to its overinflated runtime and just give people something to do. The bad guys feel like they are literally not allowed to kill anyone. Like a single Na'vi dies in this movie. It's insane behavior on the screen. Meanwhile, droves of colonizers are killed to the point where you're wondering if James Cameron was trying to make imperialism more sympathetic this time around. It obviously isn't, which is why it feels so weird and jarring that these bad guys don't seem as bad as they were in the last movie. And on top of that, Zoe Saldana, one of the main leads, I swear gets like 12 lines of dialogue in this movie until like the last 20 minutes, where, she finally gets something to do, but at that point you've been waiting for her so long, you're just wondering what she's been doing for the past 2.5 hours. All that said, the best part of the movie was when it was Moby Dick. They got rid of unobtainium, but they still kept the Sanskrit font, so after this drawn-out rant, much like the drawn-out film, C tier. I doubt I will ever fully watch this again, but, maybe if I do drugs first. So with that, we kind of run out of movies for me to put on the tier list. Let me know if you feel I maybe mischaracterized anything and it might deserve a different slot on the tier list, and if there are any movies you wish I maybe should have reviewed this year that maybe I could look into next year. I hope maybe what I've said about these movies, either in this video or others throughout the year, has maybe inspired you to check something out that you otherwise wouldn't have, or maybe I saved you a couple dollars that you would have spent at the movie theaters for not seeing Moonfall. Either way, hope you had a great 2022, and maybe you'll see me posting more videos in 2023. Until next time.